Are you an expat freelancer, or for that matter a digital nomad? Keep watching this video. Okay, so go over to infuriated.com, especially if you're a high net wealth individual or an expat, which leads me to this particular video. And that's that one of the most common questions I'm getting asked more recently is, look, I'm a freelancer, I'm a digital nomad. How do I open an investment account? Because sometimes I don't have a local tax number. So I'm going to go over the basic ingredients for opening up an investment account if you're a digital nomad or a freelancer. Now, first of all, if you're a freelancer in a country, but you have a tax number, you have proof of address, proof of ID, it's very simple. For example, if you emigrated to, I don't know, let's take a random example. Let's say you emigrated to Canada. And I think the tax number in Canada is called the SIN number. It's the equivalent of the UK national insurance number. Let's say you got a job in Canada, but now you're a freelancer. You kept your tax ID, then it's very simple. You just need to open up an account, either with an advisor or DIY account, and also give your proof of address, proof of ID. And on the application form, it will ask for a tax number because that's now international law for pretty much all investment providers. But let's say you've moved to a country as a digital nomad and you don't have a tax number. Now, in that case, first of all, I would say get a tax number. Even if you use your home address and home tax ID to begin with, it's better to use the local tax number eventually, because many countries like Canada and Australia are now saying that even though they're not going to tax expats like the Americans do, America taxes all expats unless they renounce their citizenship on overseas income. Whereas with Canada and Australia and a few others, they've said that expats have to quote unquote show intent. In other words, close your gym membership, close or at least don't put money in your local bank account. The danger with using your local tax number and local proof of address is in 5 or 10 years you go back to the country, the authorities might say, hold on, were you really an expat? You were using your local tax number in Canada or Australia or whatever, and for that matter, you were using your account to fund this investment. So what's going on here? Are you really an expat or not? Or were you really an expat or not if you've already came back to the country? Now, having said that, there are certain times where basically you might have no alternative. If, for example, you're in quite an extreme country, like you're based in, I don't know, Cuba or Iran or whatever, even if you're not a nomad, by the way, even if you're working at an international school, an embassy or whatever, sometimes you have no alternative but to do that and just use your local proof of address, because most providers do not want to accept people in sanctioned countries like Cuba. But I would say if you're going to go to a place like, for example, Malaysia, Thailand, anywhere that doesn't charge you on overseas income, get a tax number. Make sure you make it your business to get a tax number, and usually you can. I'll give you an example. On a Facebook group, I saw a question from an expat in Malaysia, and the question went something like this. My bank, HSBC in this instance, is asking for a tax identification number. I don't have it because I'm on the MM2H program in Malaysia, which is a retirement program. How do I get a tax number? And 2 or 3 people rightly suggested that whilst the Malaysian authorities don't make it compulsory to get a tax number, at least they didn't before, and indeed you don't have to pay tax in Malaysia on most forms of overseas income, it is possible to get a tax number if you want it for the purposes of your investment account and indeed banking. So most countries are like this. If you really want to get a tax number, actually you can get it. So if you're going to relocate to a place as a digital nomad, I would actually research online and say, okay, how do I get a TIN number? TIN, that's tax identification number. With every country you're going to go to, make sure you do that particular research. So let's say you're going to go to Thailand and you want to go on the elite visa, which is a kind of long-term visa. I would Google and say, well, okay, I'm going to Thailand on an elite visa. How do I get a tax number on an elite visa? It's always better to get a tax number locally, even if you, legally speaking, don't have to pay any tax because that country doesn't tax overseas income. The point is, this is something that's needed for investment accounts and sometimes bank accounts. So actually get that sorted. The only exception is if you're moving to a country which has no tax numbers because there's 0% tax on all forms of income. For example, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the Cayman Islands, there's about 12, 15, 20 countries in the world, Monaco, who don't tax any form of income, at least when it comes to income tax, whether it's local or overseas income. In comparison, if you move to a place like Thailand or Malaysia or any country that in general doesn't tax overseas income, but they do tax local income, if you try to open up a brokerage account with your details, with your local proof of address, and you say to them, well, look, I don't have a tax number because, well, I don't need to pay tax because it's overseas income. The bank and the brokerage are still going to say, no, but we need this because legally speaking, these countries have tax identification numbers, so we need to get this information. So I would say just get prepared, get your local tax number, reach out to somebody who knows how to invest for expats and actually do everything properly rather than relying on your home country. How can I help you? In two ways. First of all, are you an expat, a high net wealth individual, or just somebody who lives in a part of the world where it's difficult to get access to quality investment solutions? In which case, go onto my website on infuriated.com and find out more. If you don't fit into any of those categories, then in which case there's a range of free material on my website, on this YouTube channel, and indeed on my Quora, where I get over 200 or have received over 231 million views in the last few years. And finally, if you want to actually read my thoughts in more detail, go onto Amazon and find my book on there.